You never expect to be disowned with a smile.
Not at a graduation.
Not in public.
Not by your own parents.
My name's Senator, and the last time I stood beside my family, it was on a sunlit morning in Harvard Yard, my sister Callista's graduation. The kind of day where people wear press suits, pass around roses, and pretend nothing's broken. But for me, it was the day everything shattered. I arrived early, not out of excitement, just to confirm what I already feared, that I'd really become invisible to them, that they'd have the audacity to make it official. The yard was buzzing, students in caps and gowns, parents hugging tightly, programs fluttering in the breeze like little flags of pride. I walked alone. No one saved me a seat. No one called my name. When I spotted them, my parents and Callista, I paused. My mother, Astria, in her pale blue suit, wore that same tight smile she used when guests arrived early. My father, Everett, was checking his phone, blazer slung over his arm like a prop. Callista, radiant in her honors cords, stood between them like the trophy they always wanted. If you like this story and it touches your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to give us more motivation to create better content. When they saw me, it was like they barely remembered who I was.
Oh, Sin, my mother said.
Not warmly, just flatly. You came.
I smiled thinly.
I got the invitation. Her reply? A dry laugh. You must have seen a forwarded version. I wasn't sure the RSVP made it that far. That's how it began. But the real moment, the one that carved itself into my memory, came later. My father stepped up to the mic during the ceremony. Cameras clicked. Callista beamed. And he said, "Today, we not only celebrate Callista, but we mark a turning point in our family. A necessary shift in values. From this day forward, we will no longer extend ourselves to those who do not align with our vision. That includes our youngest daughter, Senior." Silence. No one gasped. No protest. Just the sound of someone behind me coughing. And my heart, somewhere beneath my ribcage, trying to convince me this wasn't happening.
It was.
And they meant every word. You know, real betrayal doesn't always come with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes wrapped in applause. Sometimes it sounds like a proud father giving a speech.
I didn't stand.
I didn't cry. I just sat there, frozen, watching them pretend I didn't exist. I've heard stories like mine more times than I can count since that day. A woman whose mother made her sit at the kids' table at her own engagement party. A man whose father removed him from the family will after he donated a kidney to his brother. A girl who watched her mother post graduation photos, cropped to cut her out. You think it's rare, but it's not. Sometimes the people who raise you also raise a version of you they're willing to abandon. And here's the thing they don't tell you when you're the black sheep. It's not always about what you did wrong. It's often about what you refuse to be quiet about. Lesson? If someone disowns you in front of the world, don't rush to disappear. Stand still. Let them make it clear. Because clarity, however painful, is the first step toward freedom. And while I sat there with my guest badge clipped to my blazer like a scar, I realized something. They didn't just leave me out of the program. They left me out of the story. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because what they didn't know was that I'd already uncovered their biggest secret. They didn't slam a door in my face. They didn't scream or accuse. They just edited me out, quietly, cleanly, like I was a typo in their perfect script. After my father's speech disowning me at the ceremony, I walked out of the tent. Not rushed. Not shaking. Just hollow. I still had this little badge pinned to my jacket. It said guest. No name. No family crest. Just Times New Roman indifference. That should have been enough. But the final cut came at the reception. There was a long table with a calligraphy card that read Caldwell and guests. I approached it with this strange hope in my chest, one I hated myself for still having. I searched every name card. Callista's, Aunt Miriam, even her old college roommate. But not mine. A girl I hadn't seen since middle school spotted me. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, hey. I thought you weren't coming." Your mom said it was a closed family celebration. I just nodded, smiled like it didn't sting, like I hadn't just been erased again. Here's the thing about exclusion. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It looks like no seat saved. It sounds like your name not being called. It feels like standing in a room full of people who pretend they don't see you. And the worst part? It's never just one moment. It's 100 small ones. I once spoke with a woman who was the only adopted child in her family. She told me she stopped getting birthday cards at 16. Her siblings still did. Her mom's excuse? Oh, we just forgot this year. Another friend, cut from the holiday newsletter the same year he came out. And a guy I worked with who found out from Facebook that his sister got married. He wasn't invited. They told him afterward. It was just a small gathering. It's always framed as an oversight. But when it happens over and over again, it's not forgetfulness. It's a strategy. At the reception, I found a folded ivory card sitting quietly on the table. I opened it. Congratulations to our only daughter, Callista. With all our love, Mom and Dad. That line was the scalpel. And still, no one said anything. Not the relatives. Not the family friends. Not Callista. A woman in a floral dress passed by and glanced at my badge. You must be with the catering team, she said. You're not wearing the family pin. I smiled. Didn't correct her. Just reached for a glass of Prosecco and kept walking. Because by that point I understood. They didn't want me gone. They wanted me unnoticed. Here's the small lesson I learned. Erasure isn't always loud. In families like mine, it's often curated, like the guest list, like the name cards, like the narrative. And sometimes, the people who hurt you don't want to fight with you. They want to write you out so neatly that no one even remembers to ask where you went. But that night, I didn't go home right away. I walked. Past Harvard cafes and sidewalk lunches, past daughters holding graduation balloons, past everything I thought a family was supposed to be. And when I got back to my apartment, a strange quiet wrapped around me. It didn't ache like it used to. Not yet. Because what I was about to find next would change everything. They say memory is a fragile thing. But what they don't tell you is, photographs life faster than people do. That night, after the graduation reception, I returned home and stood in the quiet of my small kitchen. I tossed the program on the counter, expecting it to land flat. Instead, the pages fluttered open, like they had something to say. My eyes landed on a photo. My parents and Callista. All three smiling, polished, positioned just right. The caption? A proud moment for the Caldwell family. No trace of me, not even in the background. I don't know why that photo hit harder than the speech or the missing name card. Maybe because it was so final, so clean. But I wasn't ready to go to bed with that version of the story in my head. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out an old yearbook. Callista's high school graduation. Back then, my mom had told me not to come. It's her moment. Senator, don't make it about you. Still, I'd gone. I remembered the dress she picked out for me. She'd even yelled at me for wrinkling it across the waist. I remembered because I'd stood right next to Callista in that photo on the porch. But when I looked at the printed version in the yearbook, I was gone. Cropped out.
Clean.
Like I was never there. That's when I realized. They didn't forget me.
They edited me.
This wasn't neglect. It was curation. I've heard stories since then. People who showed up to family weddings only to find their name missing from the seating chart, then later, missing from the photos. One woman told me her mom deleted every comment she made on family posts, said it was messy to have drama on Facebook. A man shared how his parents reprinted their holiday cards after their daughter came out as transgender, without her in them. They said it was just less confusing. But the truth is, it's about control. Controlling how the story looks, how the family appears, even if it means erasing someone who still breathes, still loves, still tries. That night, I stared at that yearbook page until my vision blurred. It didn't feel like grief. It felt like violation. Small lesson? You can't heal from something while pretending it never happened. And when someone rewrites history without you in it, you have every right to write your own. I fell asleep on the floor that night, curled around that yearbook like a child hugging a ghost. And when I woke up, I didn't cry. I got quiet. Then I started digging. Because I had a feeling. This wasn't just emotional erasure. It was legal. And what I discovered next, it wasn't just a speech they used to erase me. It was a signature. One I didn't even write. Grief keeps you awake. But betrayal? That wakes up every part of you. It was past midnight, and I was still sitting at my kitchen table. The rain had started, soft, apologetic taps against the window, like it was too polite to interrupt. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stared at the glow of my laptop. I had one goal: find the facts they didn't want me to see. There was still an old shared drive linked to my email, back from when I helped with the Family Foundation's bookkeeping. They never revoked my access. Of course they didn't. They never thought I mattered enough to be dangerous. At first, I clicked through out of habit. Donation receipts, board notes, old tax files. But then, I saw a folder. Holdings _updated. I clicked. Inside was a PDF. Transfer authorization. Seaside property. Final. And there it was. My full legal name, typed out above a signature. Only it wasn't mine. The S in son was flat. The L curled wrong. It looked close, but not close enough. And stamped on the side, notarized by Savannah Caldwell. My cousin. That was the moment I stopped feeling sad and started feeling angry. I pulled an old lease agreement from my drawer, one with my actual signature, and compared them. No match. Not even close. They didn't just erase me emotionally. They forged me out of my own inheritance. I remember a friend once told me his name was taken off the family land in South Carolina after his grandmother died. They told him it had just expired. Another woman discovered her mother had refinanced the house using her daughter's credit score, without her knowledge. By the time she found out, her name was attached to a debt she never owed. These things happen quietly. Not because they're legal, but because they're familiar. Because in families like this, love is conditional, but control is permanent. I called the only person I still trusted in that family, Aunt Mavis. She answered on the second ring. Her voice cracked the way people's voices do when they already know why you're calling. I told her what I found. There was a pause. Then she whispered, "You saw it, didn't you?" She confessed. My mother told her it was just paperwork, that they were cleaning up the books. She said she thought it was just a mistake. But I knew better. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. And I wasn't going to stay silent. Lesson? If they're willing to forge your name, you need to remember your worth. Because sometimes the people who taught you to write your signature are the ones trying to erase it. By dawn, I wasn't just a daughter who got cropped out of the photo. I was a woman building a case. I had the documents. I had the motive. I had the proof. But I needed more. Not just to confront them, but to make them remember the one thing they didn't count on. I still knew how to read everything. And what I uncovered next, it would shake the very foundation they tried to protect. Some betrayals come with a signature. Others come with a sigh and the words, "I didn't know what to do." After I found the forged document, the one that removed my name from the seaside property, I made one call. Aunt Mavis. She was always the softest voice in the storm. The aunt who slipped extra cookies into my backpack, who mailed me birthday cards even when the rest of the family forgot. She never defended me publicly, but I always believed she saw me. So when she picked up the phone, I didn't ease in. "I found a property transfer with my name forged on it," I said. I didn't sign it. There was silence. The kind that confirms everything. Then, softly, "Oh, son, you saw it, didn't you?" That moment. It felt like watching someone nod at a crime scene. Not surprised. Just sad it had to come to this. She told me my mother mentioned it months ago. Said it was just housekeeping. Tidying up the documents for tax season. She didn't question it. Didn't ask why my name had to be removed. Didn't wonder why it was all done without my knowledge. "I thought maybe they'd tell you later," she said. I didn't want to get involved. I slid down the kitchen wall and sat on the floor. "You knew," I whispered. And she did. That's the thing about complicity. It doesn't always look like betrayal. Sometimes it looks like politeness, like not wanting to make trouble, like choosing the family group chat over the family truth. I've heard stories like mine since then. A friend whose uncle knew about the abuse, but stayed quiet out of respect. Another whose cousin watched their inheritance disappear into legal loopholes and said nothing. Even a woman whose sister admitted, years later, "I knew they were lying about you. I just didn't want to be next." And honestly, I get it. Silence feels safer. Until it doesn't. Aunt Mavis meant well. I believe that. But meaning well doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't put your name back on the deed. It doesn't erase the nights you spent wondering if you were imagining everything. Before we hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "You know how your mother gets. And your father, he just follows." I let that sentence hang in the air. You know how your mother gets. Like she's a weather pattern. Like all you can do is brace for her, not confront her. That's how families like mine operate. With fear wrapped in tradition and silence dressed up as respect. Here's the lesson I held onto that night. Silence isn't always protection. Sometimes it's permission. When people refuse to speak up, they leave you to carry the truth alone. And truth is heavy, especially when it's stolen, denied, or notarized under someone else's name. I didn't blame Aunt Mavis, but I couldn't let her off the hook either. Because if I wanted to reclaim what was mine, emotionally, legally, spiritually, I had to stop pretending anyone was going to save me. That morning, I made a promise to myself. No more hoping they'd do the right thing. From now on, I would be the one holding the pen. And when I opened my laptop again, I didn't just look for what was taken from me. I looked for what else they were hiding. Some people inherit heirlooms. Others inherit silence. I got both, and a house I never knew was gone. After the call with Aunt Mavis, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I wrapped myself in a blanket, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at that glowing screen like it held all the answers I'd been too scared to ask. It did. I dug deeper into property records, cross-referenced deed numbers, scanned registries. It took hours, but eventually there it was. Bar Harbor, Maine. Parcel ID 0017426. My grandmother's house. The cedar-shingled one, with the blue rocking chairs. The one where I learned to shuck corn and sand porch railings. Where we used to rinse salt off our feet while Dad grilled salmon on the back deck. Status: sold. Buyer: Harlow Holdings, LLC. I blinked. They didn't transfer it. They sold it. No email. No discussion. No signature for me because they'd already faked the one they needed. And Harlow Holdings? The registered agent was a Boston attorney, the same one Callista had posted about on LinkedIn a few weeks back. Apparently, he was helping launch her legacy-focused investment firm. So that's what the house became. Not a place. Not a memory. A launchpad for someone else's brand. That moment, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was displacement. The realization that a part of your history has been scrubbed clean and rebranded as someone else's achievement. I closed the browser slowly. Not like I was shutting down a website, but like I was sealing a coffin. And this isn't just my story. I once met a woman at a community center who told me her family sold their grandfather's farm, a property promised to her, so her brother could buy into a tech startup. They told her they were keeping it in the family, just not in her part of it. Another friend discovered his dad sold his childhood home and moved the money into a private college fund for a nephew. When he asked why, his mother simply said, "You didn't need it." That's how legacy theft works in families like ours. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes out of calculation, and always in the name of what's best for the image. Here's what I learned. If they sell off your past to fund someone else's future, they were never building a legacy. They were building a ladder. And if you didn't fit the picture they wanted to frame, they had no problem using your history as wallpaper. I stared at my coffee cup. Cold now, half full, forgotten. This wasn't grief anymore. This was violation. I threw on a coat and left the apartment, walked to the bookstore down the block just to clear my head. I wasn't there to shop. I was just trying to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like betrayal. But fate Fate has a way of showing up in the self-help aisle. Because as I turned the corner, I heard her voice. Son. And there she was. Mrs. Henderson. My mother's old friend. Church luncheons, garden club, passive-aggressive perfection in pearls. What she said next would reveal more than she intended, and confirm something I had only suspected until now. Some people build empires with cement. My mother built hers with silence, posture, and perfectly worded apologies that never quite said, "I'm sorry." I ran into Mrs. Henderson near the self-help aisle at the bookstore of all places. She clutched a copy of Aging Gracefully Through Faith, smiled like she was seeing me for the first time in a decade, and said, "Darling, I heard Callista's expanding into luxury real estate. Isn't that wonderful?" I kept my tone flat. "Funny. I thought that house was still ours." That flicker in her eyes, the half-second flash of recognition, was all I needed. She knew. She had known. "Oh, I don't know all the details," she stammered. "You know how parents are always making moves without their kids." She smiled again. The kind of smile that means don't make a scene, sweetheart. I didn't. I just left. Because I was done being polite. You see, in families like mine, erasure isn't just an act. It's a production. And the star of that show? My mother, Astria Caldwell. The next day, I stood outside the Caldwell Foundation, watching the tinted windows reflect the sky like nothing could touch them. The last time I walked into that building, I was 16, holding a scholarship essay I'd written for a summer program. Mom told me to smile, stand still, and not embarrass her in front of the board. They gave the spot to Callista's best friend. This time, I wasn't there for a favor. I was there for a reckoning. I didn't make an appointment. The front desk in turn gave me the kind of tight smile reserved for uninvited guests and possible lawsuits. I walked straight down the hall. My mother didn't flinch when I entered. She looked up, hands folded neatly on her desk, as if I had come to ask for fashion advice, not justice. "So, Len," she said, smooth as silk. "I assume you'd like a few minutes." I stayed standing. "I regret that you felt hurt," she began. There it was, the apology that isn't. Not, "I regret what we did." Just, "I regret that it looked bad." This is how image-obsessed families operate. They speak in press release syntax. They don't apologize for actions. They apologize for perceptions. "You're still welcome at events," she continued. "Just as a guest. Not as part of the Caldwell legacy." I tilted my head. "You mean not as a liability?" She gave a soft exhale like I was being dramatic. "We can't have every branch growing in different directions. People notice." I replied, calm as ever. "Good. I hope they do." Because I wasn't bending anymore. Real-life example? A woman once told me her father had told everyone she was too unstable to be involved in the family business. What he meant was, she asked questions. Another friend, cut out of his parents' estate, was told, we didn't want to complicate things. Translation, we didn't want to include someone we couldn't control. Small lesson? Politeness can be cruelty in pearls. And the people who smile through betrayal often expect you to do the same. But I didn't come there to cry. Or even to argue. I came to remind her that I wasn't gone. I had proof. I had a voice. And soon, the world would hear it. Because while she stood in front of donors, polishing the family name, I was about to put it all on record.
I didn't want revenge.
I wanted a record. Something that said, I existed. I mattered. I saw what they did. I remember. After that final conversation with my mother, I didn't go home and cry. I went home and got to work. My apartment transformed into a war room. Legal pads stacked like barricades, highlighters bleeding across documents, my old laptop glowing with PDFs, emails, and folder names they never thought I'd still have access to. They should have locked the door after they pushed me out. What I found was more than just a bad signature. It was a blueprint. Trust disbursements rerouted without board review. Deeds refiled through shell companies. Marketing memos where my name had been quietly deleted from everything, right down to the family logo. I compiled everything, labeled it, time-stamped it. I even included voice recordings I had gathered over the years, Casual moments in boardrooms, donor lunches, car rides, where they forgot I was in a room or assumed I wasn't listening. One stuck with me most. It was my mother's voice at a donor prep meeting. We only use Callista's face in marketing. The other one doesn't photograph well with our narrative. Then my father's chuckle. She used to read everything. Yes, Dad. I still do. You see, in some families, betrayal isn't sudden. It's bureaucratic. It's quiet. It's printed on letterhead and stamped by a notary. I walked into their longtime attorney's office with a velvet envelope, deep burgundy, gold-trimmed. It was the same kind my mother had once given me at age 12, filled with fancy stationery. Back then, the note inside said, "Always write with grace." This time, the envelope held notarized affidavits, a trust challenge, a digital link to audio evidence. When he looked up at me and said, "Does this come with expectations?" I answered, "No, it comes with consequences." And it did. A week later, the article broke. A nonprofit watchdog site ran an exposé on the Caldwell Foundation. Luxury charity. Anonymous sources question integrity at the Caldwell Trust. I hadn't even spoken to a reporter, but someone else had. And I knew exactly which audio they leaked. My mother's voice echoed across the internet. My father's tone, so casual, so smug, was played on morning radio and clipped into Instagram Reels. The article didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Real life? This happens more than people know. I've spoken with a woman whose father funneled trust money through an art nonprofit to buy her brother a condo. A man whose name was wiped from a scholarship fund his grandmother created because he didn't reflect the family's values. When family becomes brand, love gets repackaged as loyalty, and truth becomes a liability. Here's the lesson I learned. You can't outshine a lie by staying silent. Sometimes the only way to prove you were there is to leave a paper trail they can't burn. By noon, donors were pulling out. Events were canceled. Board members started resigning to pursue other ventures. And comments flooded social media. Where did the money go? Nepotism at its finest. Erasing people for optics? Sounds familiar. And I still hadn't said a word. Because I didn't need to fight in public. I had filed something stronger than a statement. I filed a petition. And soon, we'd be in court. Not for attention, but for the truth. And what happened in that courtroom? It didn't just shake them. It changed everything. The courtroom wasn't grand. No mahogany walls or soaring ceilings. Just tired carpet, humming fluorescent lights, and rows of worn benches that smelled like dust and old paper. But to me, it may as well have been a coliseum. I sat beside Philip, my attorney, calm, steady, the kind of person who speaks softly and carries certified copies of everything. Across the aisle sat my parents. My mother stiff, unreadable. My father hunched, eyes on the floor. Callista scrolling through her phone like it was a dentist appointment. They didn't think this was real. They thought I was bluffing. They were wrong. When the judge called the hearing to order, it was quiet. Not the reverent kind. The tense kind. Like everyone could sense something sharp was about to happen, but no one knew who'd bleed first. Philip stood and calmly introduced Exhibits A through E. Financial records, forgery evidence, audio recordings, and a will. Grandmother Elise's original will. The one they replaced. The one that named me, Sin Caldwell, as the primary beneficiary of the Bar Harbor property and future trust distributions. The silence cracked. Callista's fingers stopped scrolling. My mother's head snapped toward me. My father whispered, "That version was never supposed to be." The judge cut him off. "Intentions aren't law, Mr. Caldwell. Documents are." That one line? It was everything I'd been waiting to hear. Someone finally saying, "What was done to you matters." Then came the audio. That donor prep recording, my mother's voice, so smooth and polished. We only use Callista's face in marketing. The other one doesn't photograph well with our narrative. Followed by my father's easy laugh. "We need to be careful what's in fines." She used to read everything. The courtroom didn't gasp. They didn't need to. The stillness was louder than any outcry. My mother stood. "You ungrateful girl," she hissed. "You waited all this time just to destroy us." I stood too. "No," I said quietly. "I waited so I wouldn't destroy myself in the process." Here's the truth about justice. It doesn't always feel like a victory. Sometimes it feels like grief with paperwork. But that day, when the judge ruled in my favor, declared me the rightful heir to the Bar Harbor property, froze the trust, and referred the Caldwell Foundation to the state attorney general, something inside me released. Not joy, not triumph, just relief. Because finally, the record was corrected. Real-life echoes? A woman once told me her father forged her mother's will to exclude her from the estate. It took 5 years and a court challenge, but she won. Not because she wanted the land, but because her name belonged there. Because her mother's truth was worth defending. Even posthumously. Another friend said, "I didn't want the business. I just wanted to stop them from pretending I never helped build it." Small lesson? Sometimes, you have to go to court not to win something new, but to reclaim what was always yours. Your history, your dignity, your name. As we left the courtroom, Philip asked, "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked down at the lapel of my coat, the space where the Caldwell crest used to sit, the one I wore the day they disowned me. It wasn't there anymore, but I didn't need it, because I had something better. The truth. 6 months later, I stood barefoot in the center of a sunlit room. No cameras, no applause, just mismatched folding chairs, a table of cupcakes, and kids flipping through sketchbooks with crayon-colored dreams. It wasn't a foundation. It was a beginning. And that's where we'll go next. To the legacy I built from the ashes of theirs. The building used to be an old municipal library, dusty shelves, flickering lights, forgotten corners. Now it was full of light, laughter, color, and possibility. 6 months after the courtroom ruling, I stood barefoot in the center of that space. A modest room just outside Providence, newly renovated into a literacy and art center for foster teens. There were no velvet ropes, no champagne flutes, just mismatched folding chairs, half-eaten cupcakes, and kids bent over sketchbooks, turning their stories into something real. It was quiet, but not empty. It felt like home. I hadn't returned to the Caldwell Foundation. Not once. The court had awarded me full legal rights to the Bar Harbor property and its remaining inheritance funds. I could have sold it. I could have burned it to the ground. Instead, I rebuilt it. A retreat for young women from foster care backgrounds. A place to write, rest, heal, without needing to be photogenic for someone else's narrative. No branding. No curated smiles. Just space. And belonging. Near the door, there's a plaque I insisted we install. Simple. Silver. It reads, "In memory of Elise Caldwell. For the granddaughters they erased. And the ones who refused to stay erased." I run my fingers across the engraving sometimes. Not because I'm holding on to the past, but because I finally know what it means to build a future that's mine. Real-life echoes? I've since heard from others who've done the same. A man in Chicago used his inheritance from a toxic parent to start a sober, living home. A woman who was cut out of her family trust funded a housing scholarship for teen moms. They all said the same thing. I didn't want to pass the pain on. I wanted to plant something new. Callista surprised me once. She sent an envelope. No return address. Just my name in her sharp handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "You were right. I'm sorry it took this to see it. I didn't write back. I didn't need to." Some letters aren't answers. They're acknowledgments. And sometimes that's enough. I folded hers and placed it in a lockbox next to the old graduation pin I once thought would make me feel chosen. Neither carries the weight they used to, but I keep them anyway. Not as wounds, as witnesses. Here's the final lesson I'll leave you with. Forgiveness doesn't mean saying it didn't hurt. It means deciding that hurt won't run your life. It means choosing not to sit outside the house that closed its doors to you, but building a door of your own, opening it wide, and saying, You don't need to prove anything to be welcome here. A little boy interrupted my thoughts that day. He handed me a paper badge he made, crinkled edges, crooked tape, glitter glue spelling out important. "This is for you," he said, "because you showed up." I pinned it to my lapel, right where the Caldwell crest used to sit. This one? It was softer, brighter, earned. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't need a table set for me, because I had built one. And these days, I get to choose who sits with me. Have you ever had to walk away from a family that didn't see you? Have you ever turned pain into something beautiful? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. More real stories, more healing, more truth are on the way.